Welcome, everyone, to the NewVision, OldWays podcast, a greatly ambitious journey of discovery where we can all learn to live better, mentally healthier, and more fulfilling lives. If you're just discovering us, feel free to go back and take the journey from the beginning. And if you're already a NewVision, OldWays fan, welcome back and enjoy season
6.
And now, here is your host, Tony Marinaccio.
You are listening to NewVision, OldWays, the podcast that explores timeless wisdom for the modern mind in a fun, relaxed, and most important, interactive way with you, the listener. I am your host, Tony Marinaccio, and let's get the episode started. Welcome, Visioneers, to another great episode of the NewVision, OldWays podcast. And I really hope you have been enjoying season 6. We have delved into so much, from overcoming the winter blues to the extensive 3-part interview with Tracy Poff, where we discussed medical intuition and many topics related to that. And we also dug into other topics like nihilism, relativism, and of course the dreaded socialism. And we are just getting warmed up. And I am excited to see where this new year takes this podcast. I have big plans and expectations for NewVision, OldWays. And of course, I cannot thank all of you enough for being a part of this. And yes, you are a part of this. And I thank those of you who have signed up for the newsletter, both by the link in the show notes or by going to the newvisionoldways.com website. I will do my best to get that newsletter out every chance I can. And I know at the holidays it's been a little sporadic, but we'll get there. And I also thank those of you who are supporting the show via the support link in the show notes. And again, at the NewVision, OldWays website as well. Believe me when I tell you that every penny counts. These episodes take a lot of time to plan, research, write, record, and produce. And I am mainly a one-man band, as I have said before. So I do appreciate the support. And there will be a great new way to utilize Patreon as well. This will allow support options, and that is coming very soon. You guys asked for that, so it shall be done. I'll update as soon as possible when that is up and running. So now that we have all the formalities out of the way, what do I have in store for you today? Well, to answer that, I have to go all the way back to, believe it or not, episode number 1, the introductory episode where I quoted and mentioned that I will get into a story that I have been working on since that time. And that is a story based on the Arthur Herman book, The Cave in the Light. So after 58 episodes, I am happy to say we are finally here. Thank you so much, fake studio audience, for that applause. It's truly appreciated. So, why did it take so long to get to this point? Well, because to truly engage with a subject like this, I wanted to make absolute sure that we had laid the groundwork, the philosophical tools, the mental framework, the context needed to understand why this story matters so deeply right now. And to start this all off, I want to talk about 2 men that have shaped much of Western world philosophy of how life should be lived. 2 dramatically different points of view, and the battle of who is on the right side is still going on today. So who is responsible for this battle that never ends? Well, we have 2 main fighters in the ring. In the left corner, we have Plato, and in the right corner, we have Aristotle. And after roughly 2,350 years, these 2 heavyweights show no signs of giving up. You might ask, why do these 2 old fogies matter after all this time? Well, when you play a significant role in how humans have lived for the last 2,350 years, you've earned that relevance. This entire concept is what the NewVision, OldWays podcast was mainly built on. Showing how with all humans, not much has changed with our needs, our fears, our hopes, and our dreams. Humans are just that, humans. The technology has changed. The amount of people on Earth has certainly changed, but the basic ideas that form who we really are inside are no different now than they were 2,000 plus years ago. And if we strip away all of the craziness of our modern world and again dig down deep into our souls, we can see the wisdom of those ancient times and how it holds true today. We can learn so much from these fellows. So there's no better time than right now to tap into that ancient wisdom and see how it can change our modern lives for the better than right now. So let's start episode 59, The Cave in the Light, the battle for our souls.
Aristotle, you're always focused on the details. Don't you ever wonder what lies beyond them?
I wonder how long you'll keep chasing shadows while I study the real world right in front of me.
But the real world is just an imitation of the perfect world of forms.
And I prefer the imitation that actually exists. At least it's useful.
You're like a man who's content with a reflection, while I seek the original.
And you're like someone waiting for the original and missing all the reflections around him.
Oh, these two, they never stop arguing. Plato and Aristotle, the heavyweight bout of all heavyweight bouts. Not only has the fight lasted over 2,000 years, it's raging now more than ever. Same debate, different actors. You'd think we would have solved this already, but of course not even close. There are moments in history where two minds collide so powerfully that their disagreement never truly ends. It simply changes characters, uses new language, new institutions, new slogans, but the argument itself, its spirit, remains alive and well. That is what the great book, The Cave in the Light by Arthur Herman, reveals to us so clearly. It is not merely a book about philosophy. It is a diagnosis, a map, a warning that this is more relevant now than ever before. It tells us that beneath nearly every cultural, political, and moral struggle we face today lies a timeless fracture, one that began in ancient Greece, between two men who more or less shared a teacher, a city, and a love of truth, but could not agree on where the truth actually lives. And those men were, of course, Plato and Aristotle. Plato was a student of Socrates, the first philosopher and the first intellectual hero. Plato made him as vivid as any figure from literature and used him to open a new chapter in the Greek world's unprecedented effort to understand the world and reality through the use of reason. And Aristotle was a 20-year student of Plato. But the division between the two men widened dramatically. Plato believed the world we see is not necessarily the world that is. Reality to him exists beyond the senses, beyond the flesh, beyond time, beyond human limitations. What we touch and experience is only a shadow of something far more real, far more perfect. Plato believed that human beings are not naturally oriented toward truth. We are too emotional, impulsive, easily misled, and if left alone, we can easily mistake appearances for reality. This belief culminates in one of the most famous metaphors ever written, the allegory of the cave itself. Plato asks us to imagine human beings chained in a cave since birth, facing a wall. Behind them, a fire casts shadows, people, objects, movements, flickering images projected onto the stone. The prisoners believed these shadows were reality because they have never known anything else. One prisoner escapes. He sees the fire. He then exits the cave. He sees the sun, and now he understands truth. But when he returns to tell the others, he is mocked, rejected, threatened. The prisoners do not want truth. They want certainty. And certainty, even when false, feels safer than transformation. Think about this in today's reality, the social media life that has now become the cave for so many. And we will return to that idea in just a bit. Plato's message to the world is unsettling. He believes that most people are not equipped to handle reality, and those who try to awaken them will suffer for it. In Plato's worldview, this creates a moral obligation for the so-called enlightened few to guide the many, even if the many resist. Sound familiar? Now, let's pause here because this is where Plato can become both a visionary and dangerous at the same time. Once you accept that the masses are trapped in illusion, it becomes very easy to justify control in the name of truth. So-called philosopher kings with idealized expert rule, centralized authority, moral enforcement, Plato does not trust freedom without enlightenment, and he does not trust enlightenment to arise naturally. How dare you think you can do your own research during COVID? Are you a doctor? Kind of thing. Aristotle, on the other hand, watched all of this and objected. Where Plato looked upward toward ideal forms, Aristotle looked outward toward the living world. He believed truth was not something we escape to, it was something we discover through careful observation, experience, and disciplined thought. Humans were flawed, yes, but capable of reason, capable of virtue, and capable of growth. Aristotle did not deny ideals, he grounded them. He believed morality was not just imposed from above, but also cultivated from within through habit, character, and responsibility. Not perfection, but practical wisdom. Not utopia, but balance. And here lies the great divide. Plato asks, what should the world be? And Aristotle will ask, what is the world really? Plato trusts systems. Aristotle trusts people, with, of course, limits. Plato fears chaos. Aristotle fears tyranny disguised as order. One could use the Hitler syndrome right here. This divide did not stay in philosophy classrooms. It became the intellectual engine of the Western world. Throughout history, Plato's descendants have built grand systems, perfect on paper, elegant in theory, but ruthless in practice. We can now bring in communism and socialism right there. They believe truth must be enforced for humanity's own good. Aristotle's descendants, by contrast, build institutions that assume imperfection and seek resilience instead of purity. The idea that we are learning all of the time and collectively, through effort, build a better life for all of us. This is not left versus right. It is really top-down versus bottom-up thinking. Control versus character. Ideas versus reality. Now, consider this. Plato's cave was dark. Our modern world, though, is flooded with light. So where is the similarity between Plato's cave and our modern world? Well, we are now not chained by mere ignorance. We are chained by constant stimulation. News cycles, social media, moral outrage on demand, algorithmic truth. We see shadows all day long, but they arrive with such brightness, such emotional intensity that we mistake who shouts the loudest for validity. The scream the Nazi fascist loud enough, long enough, someone is bound to believe it.
You wake up every single day, reach for your phone, and instantly get pulled into a glowing screen that feels almost alive. Notifications pop up one after another, each one demanding your attention. You check your messages, scroll through your feed, and consume content that has been carefully designed, not by you, but for you. You don't stop to question where it's coming from. You just keep scrolling, liking, sharing, laughing at a meme, maybe even getting angry at a headline. It feels natural, normal, almost automatic. But here's the uncomfortable truth. What you're seeing is not the full picture of reality. It's only a carefully edited version of it, a narrow slice of truth shaped by invisible hands, algorithms, advertisers, and platforms that decide what you should see, what you should ignore, and even how long you should pay attention. And while this might sound like a very modern problem, it is in fact an ancient one. Over 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Plato gave us one of the most haunting and timeless metaphors in human history, the allegory of the cave.
Today, Plato's cave doesn't imprison bodies, it captures attention. And once attention is captured, behavior follows. Plato will look at the modern society and say, see, the cave has only grown larger. Aristotle would respond, then teach people how to see. Don't blindfold them further. And this is where the cave in the light becomes more than history. It becomes prophecy. Because modern civilization is still wrestling with the same question. Do we elevate the system or the individual conscience? When truth is abstracted too far from lived reality, it becomes dangerous. When morality is centralized instead of embodied, it becomes coercive. When people are told they cannot be trusted with freedom, they eventually will prove the claim to be true. In our times, when our schools are dumbed down so far as to not upset the few, we see entire generations of young people graduating with absolutely no idea how to solve problems, how to think things through properly, and how to clearly understand right and wrong. They cannot be trusted with true freedom, just as Plato predicted. But as Aristotle reminds us of something radically and deeply unfashionable today, you cannot outsource virtue. You cannot automate wisdom. You cannot save a civilization by removing responsibility and education from its citizens. The ancient world teaches us this lesson over and over again. Societies that pursue perfection collapse under the weight of their own certainty. Societies that accept imperfection but demand character and intelligence endure longer than expected. And this is where this episode turns inward. Because the cave is not only external, it exists inside us. Comfort, habit, fear, tribal loyalty, moral laziness, and groupthink. It is far easier to accept a ready-made worldview than to think for yourself. Far easier to chant no kings and fascists than to reflect. Far easier to obey than to become. If Plato were alive today, he would recognize our modern world immediately, not because of our technology, but because of our psychology. Plato's allegory of the cave was never really about the physical cave. It was about how human beings relate to reality, how easily perception replaces truth. Just look at the mainly white woman-led ice demonstrations. Do you think that this is an organic accident? And this is also about how power can be gained, not through force, but through control of what people see or what they think they see. In Plato's story, the prisoners are chained, unable to turn their heads. Shadows are projected on the wall, and those shadows become their entire understanding of the world. The illusion is not questioned because it is all they've ever known. We are not chained to cave walls anymore. We carry the cave in our pockets. The modern cave is not dark. It is bright, colorful, endless, and endlessly persuasive. It is powered by algorithms, mathematical systems designed not to reveal truth, but to capture attention. And once attention is captured, of course, again, belief is shaped. This is the part Plato could have never imagined, but would instantly understand. Algorithms do not show us reality. They show us what keeps us engaged, and engagement is not the same as truth. Plato warned that when people mistake appearances for reality, they become vulnerable, not just to ignorance, but to manipulation. In the ancient cave, the shadows were cast by fire. In our cave, the shadows are cast by curated feeds, outrage cycles, viral narratives, and emotionally charged content optimized for clicks. The prisoners in Plato's cave didn't know they were imprisoned, and neither do we, because modern captivity feels like freedom. We choose what we scroll through. We choose who we follow. We choose what we like. But beneath that illusion of choice is something more subtle, behavioral condition. Algorithms learn what angers you, what comforts you, what affirms you, what frightens you. And when they feed it back to you again and again and again until the shadows become the world. This is where Plato's warning becomes prophetic. He feared a society where perception could be engineered, where people would confuse that perception with correctness, and where emotional reaction would replace reason. He feared a culture where those who questioned the shadows would be ridiculed, not because they were wrong, but because they were disrupting the illusion. Again, sound familiar?
And now, Visioneers, let's take a quick break to let you know how you can support the show. By clicking on the support link in the show notes or at the NewVision OldWays.com website, you can show your support by donating directly to the NewVision OldWays podcast. These episodes take time and money to produce, and by donating what you are able to, it will allow us to grow the show and give you the best content that we can. Of course, you can cancel at any time. Thank you, and now, back to the show.
Leaving the cave is not a political act. It is a personal one. Leaving the cave in Plato's story is painful. The light hurts the eyes. Truth is disorienting. The freed prisoner initially wants to return to the darkness. And when he does, when he tries to explain what he has seen, he is mocked, attacked, and dismissed. Not because the others have evidence against him, but because truth threatens identity. And right here, this is where the destructive manipulation we see all around us occurs. In the age of algorithms, identity is currency. We are encouraged, subtly and constantly, to adopt labels, tribes, and moral postures. Once identity becomes fused with belief, questioning a belief feels like a personal attack. And once that happens, the cave becomes self-sealing. And the agenda media, it has you right where it wants you. Plato understood this danger deeply. This is why he believed most people could not be trusted to govern themselves. He believed truth required guardians, philosopher kings, those who helped escape the cave and could rule on behalf of those still inside. And here's where Plato becomes dangerous again. Because in the modern world, everyone believes they've escaped the cave, especially those who control the algorithms, the institutions, and the narratives. And when people believe they alone see clearly, they stop listening, they stop doubting, they stop checking themselves. This is why Plato must be paired with his greatest critic, Aristotle. Aristotle would look at our algorithmic age and issue a different warning. He would say that systems designed to shape belief without cultivating virtue will eventually produce fragile minds, minds that cannot reason, minds that cannot tolerate disagreement, minds that collapse under the weight of their own certainty. And I gotta say it again, sound familiar? Aristotle believed truth emerges through engagement with reality, not insulation from it. Through dialogue, through friction, through lived experience, algorithms do the opposite. They remove friction. They reward certainty. They punish nuance. And that creates a culture where shadows feel safer than sunlight, because sunlight requires responsibility. But don't fear, visionaries. Leaving the modern cave does not mean you have to delete your accounts or reject technology. It means refusing to surrender your epistemic sovereignty. I love that. Epistemic sovereignty. That is your ability to decide what is true through reason, humility, and experience, to effectively control your own knowledge systems. Plato's cave today is not enforced by chains. It is enforced by comfort, by validation, by belonging, and that makes it far more difficult to escape. The most dangerous thing about the algorithmic cave is not that it lies, it fragments. Each person receives a customized reality. That is very important. I'll say it again. Each person receives a customized reality, a personalized set of shadows. And when reality fractures, truth collapses. Conversation becomes impossible, and moral courage becomes rare. Plato warned us that when this happens, societies do not fall into chaos immediately. They fall into managed illusion, where order exists, but truth does not, where obedience is easy, but wisdom is scarce. Oy, sound familiar? Again? And yet, there is hope embedded in this allegory. The cave only works as long as people remain passive. The moment someone turns their head, the moment someone questions the shadow, the moment someone accepts discomfort over certainty, the illusion weakens. Leaving the cave today looks like slowing down instead of reacting. It looks like listening instead of labeling. It looks like holding beliefs without worshiping them, leaving room for flexibility and wisdom. And most of all, it looks like cultivating moral courage. The courage to think independently, even when it costs you comfort, applause, or belonging. Plato was right about one thing. The cave is real. He was wrong about thinking that only elites can escape it. The light does not belong to philosopher kings. It belongs to those willing to pay the price of awareness. In the age of algorithms, the cave is no longer behind us. It surrounds us. And the ancient question returns once again. Will we live as shadows or as thinking, responsible human beings willing to step into the light? And again, it requires moral courage. It requires humility. It requires the willingness to be wrong and to grow. And most of all, it requires resisting the temptation to become a philosopher king in your own mind, convinced that you alone see clearly. The ancient argument between Plato and Aristotle is not about who wins. It is about what happens when one side silences the other. Plato without Aristotle becomes tyranny. Aristotle without Plato, well, it all becomes adrift. Civilization requires tension, not dominance. And that is why this ancient debate still matters, because every generation must decide whether it will live by imposed truth or cultivated wisdom, whether it will hide in comforting shadows or step into the responsibility of the light. The cave still exists. The light still shines. The choice is still ours. So, let's bring this argument out of the ancient world for a moment and into our own. If Plato were alive today, he wouldn't be just wearing a toga, he'd be building systems. He'd speak the language of optimization, expert consensus, models, and outcomes. He'd argue that human beings are too emotional, too biased, too irrational to be trusted with unfiltered reality. Plato today would say, people don't need more freedom, they need better guidance. Truth is too complex for the average person. We must manage perception to prevent chaos. Plato would believe that the world must be corrected from above by those who see further, know more, and understand the system. Now, Aristotle, on the other hand, Aristotle would sound very different. He would talk about human nature, about unintended consequences, about local knowledge, about the dangers of elegant theories that ignore lived reality. Case in point, the agenda-driven, misguided, manufactured American protests of the capture of the Venezuelan dictator, Nicolas Maduro. I guess the 8 million people fleeing Venezuela over the last decade left because things were just going so well. It has been one of the largest mass migrations in the Western Hemisphere. Maybe we should listen to them, not some white people protesting in any average city in America. Aristotle today would say systems don't live, people do. You can't fix society by abstracting away the human being. Virtue can't be downloaded, it has to be practiced. Aristotle would argue that truth emerges from the ground up through experience, dialogue, friction, and responsibility. Plato would warn us about misinformation. Hear that, fake American protesters? Aristotle would warn us about overconfidence. Hear that, soon-to-be former Governor Tim Walz? Plato would fear chaos. Aristotle would fear control disguised as order. He also believed that the goal of the political institutions was man's improvement rather than his perfection. Imagine that, man's improvement rather than his perfection. He believed the way to do this was by encouraging each individual to realize his or her potential rather than force them to submit to a collective order. Okay, last time. Sound familiar, Visioneers? Plato would ask, what should the world look like? Aristotle would respond, what does the world actually do when people live in it? Neither of them were fools. Both of them were responding to real dangers. Both were trying to save civilization from collapse. But they could only have this argument because of something we rarely talk about anymore, a culture that allowed them to disagree. Imagine that. This culture was ancient Greece. And then the next episode, we're stepping out of philosophy and into a world that made this argument possible. Because before we can ask which one was right, we need to understand the civilization that allowed them to speak at all. The cave and the light feel abstract until you realize they were born out of real streets, real debates, real lives. Plato didn't invent his ideas in silence. Aristotle didn't test his ideas in theory alone. They lived in a culture where disagreement wasn't instantly moralized, where people argued, lost, won, and argued again. That was the culture of ancient Greece. And when I think about the world we live in now, so confident, so loud, so certain, I can't help but wonder, have we lost the soil that once allowed great ideas to grow? In the next episode, we step into that soil, into the city-states, the public squares, the freedoms, and the fractures that made Plato and Aristotle possible. As we are talking about Plato and Aristotle today, it is easy to just imagine them as distant figures, marble statues, frozen in time, symbols of an abstract thought rather than living, breathing, actual human beings. But Plato and Aristotle, and you can throw Socrates in there too, were not only simply philosophers, they were participants. They were born into a world that was doing something radically new, something so powerful that it still shapes how you and I think, argue, learn, and govern today. To understand Plato and Aristotle fully, we have to understand ancient Greece itself, not as a mythic past, but as a living environment that made thinking possible in an entirely new way. Because ancient Greece didn't just produce great thinkers, it produced the conditions for thought itself. So before we judge their ideas, we need to understand their world. And when we take time to understand their world and take that wisdom and apply it to our modern world, we will have a much better understanding of who we really are and who we can become. And this story has only just begun. So stay tuned for the next episode of New Vision, Old Ways.
So, what did you think of this episode or any of the episodes? We would love to find out. And here is where to get a hold of the show and let us know. These are in the show notes, but as always, here they are. There is a support link in the show notes and on the NewVision OldWays.com website that you can click on that will allow you to donate to the show and show your support. By donating what you can, it will allow us to book guests and cover costs. Anything will help. Cancel anytime. You can also message the show from each episode on your various platforms. Just look for the Send Us a Text Message link. If that doesn't work for you, you can email us at newvisionoldways@gmail.com. You can find us on what was Twitter, now X, at NewVisionOldWay, no S on that one. Check the New Vision Old Ways YouTube channel. Type in New Vision, one word, Old Ways, one word, channel, and please subscribe. It is free and will show support for the show. It really means a lot and will help grow the show on YouTube. Find us on Facebook, New Vision Old Ways, podcast you should easily find us. And as a reminder, these are still growing platforms for us and expanding all the time, so we need your help to get the flow going with the community. And last but not least, if you can do me a huge favor and subscribe to us, like us, follow us, leave a review on whatever platform you found us on, that would be so appreciated. That will also help secure guests that we will be booking in the future. So, welcome to the middle of Season 6, and we still have a lot to cover this season, so thank you for listening. We can't wait to get your input, and I also can't wait until we get together for the next episode of New Vision Old Ways. Until then, stay true to yourself, stay informed, and stay empowered.
But the most important thing is...
This episode and all the episodes of New Vision Old Ways podcast have been written, engineered, and produced by Tony Marinaccio and TKM Productions.